I was either in 7th or 8th grade at the time when one evening I got creeped out. No, it was beyond creepy. I was scared, and that scared me more. Country or mountain kids learn to cope with all sorts of problems that city kids wouldn't know how to deal with. But when it comes to weird human behavior, we are often at a loss. My parents loved to play cards. They were part of a circle of friends that met at different houses, had potluck dinner, and played cards for the rest of the evening. I usually went with them, but that evening I was getting over some kind of flu bug. I was camped out on the living room couch, reading a book. I had asked Mama to close the curtains that faced me because the sun was in my eyes. I was still weak, and getting up was an effort. Mama did close the curtain for me, which was a big help later on. It was still daylight when my parents left. The late afternoon sun was pouring in the back windows. My cat Whiskers was draped over the back of a chair, dozing in a warm sunspot. My old dog Julie was in a similar sunspot on the living room rug. I was reading my book, and all was right with the world, peaceful and quiet. I must have dozed off. I woke up startled to hear my cat hissing and my dog growling. I never heard her growl like that before, that low rumble that still continues with the intake of breath. Julie had moved over to stand stiffly next to me, facing the front door. I could see the doorknob moving. Fortunately, the deadbolt above the knob was locked. I was still kind of befuddled when I heard someone moving to the kitchen window. They must have had sand on their shoes because I could hear the crunchy noise when they stepped across the porch to the window. I was instantly awake. It was fully dark at that point. All the curtains were still open, except the one Mama closed for me. The only light on was the one I'd been reading under. I might as well have been under a spotlight. I was in a nightgown. I'd gotten hot, so had untied the wrap robe which had slid open. I was in a jam. What to do? Before whoever it was got to the window, I rolled off the couch and flattened myself against it. We had an old cedar chest as a coffee table at that time. I pulled up my legs so I couldn't be seen from the window. Julie was barking wildly now, and the cat had gone under something. I had to move. I would be in full view from the next window. I got up dizzy and moved across the living room where the curtain was closed, toward the phone. My dog was now leaping at one of the windows, with her teeth bared and barking. Whoever it was wasn't leaving. I had a hunch they knew I was alone. I didn't know how long they had been looking in before the dog started to growl. What really spooked me was a barking dog wasn't scaring them off. There wasn't anyone around to hear my dog. The campground close to us was closed for the winter. We had the only house amongst weekend cabins. Unfortunately, it was Wednesday. I had got to the phone by moving along the wall. At one point, I was pressed up against the wall under the window that he was looking into. Yes, I was sure it was a man, from the height and across the shoulders of the jacket that I glimpsed when he moved away from one of the other windows. I lifted the phone and realized it was dead. At the same time, I heard the back door being tried. I froze for a minute because the back door had a glass window. I was dizzy and starting to panic. When I remembered that my stepdad had a different phone line put into his office at the other end of the house, I got up and ran down the hallway with my dog and into his office, locked the door behind me just in case. Thank goodness that phone was okay. I called my stepdad at the house they were playing cards at. It was only a mile away. The sheriff's station was on the other side of the lake. I needed someone to come fast. Took me a while to get him to understand with the dog barking, and I'm a blithering idiot at this point. Till Ifea nearly yelled, "Help! Come now! Someone is breaking in!" They have cut the other phone line. If they get in, I'm going out another door and hide outside. I was so dizzy, everything was moving. I sat down on the floor under his desk, where I wouldn't be seen from the window, and hoped I wouldn't have to run outside. My dog found me and stood guard over me. She was no longer barking, but her hackles were still up, and her lips were curved away from her teeth. That frightened me more than when she was barking. It was like she knew not to draw attention to where I was. It seemed like forever, but it was just a few minutes when I heard a siren. Turns out some of the people my parents were playing cards with were deputies. Daddy and one deputy came into the house to find me, while a couple of guys and a deputy looked around outside. I was shaking, cold with shock, and the office wasn't heated, so I was just plain old cold. The window on the back door had been broken out. There was blood on it. The guy cut himself on it. The doorknob lock had been opened, but the deadbolt on that door was one you had to open with a key, so the guy couldn't get in. They caught the guy the next day. He went to the doctor's office for stitches. I got a relapse of the flu bug. Gee, I wonder why. It was the night after my third stepfather died. He had prostate cancer and suffered for a year and a half. He passed away in January. I was staying with my mom. I didn't want her to be alone. He was a perfectionist. He had retired from his job the year before he found out about the cancer. He was not a religious person. My mom was, and attended church regularly. Anyway, in his eyes, my mom couldn't clean the house properly. So he would always ask me, maybe once a week, to come up and clean the house. I have OCD badly. I left no stone unturned. But this was a man who would vacuum the floor, then get the rake and take it. So all the nap in the carpet would be in the same direction. He was a superintendent at a pharmaceutical company. He was the same way at his job. Everything had to meet his standards in his department. Anyway, after he passed away, my mom and I were alone in the house. She said she couldn't stand being there without him, so I told her to go visit her friends next door. It was just getting dark, and when I get upset, I clean. I was going about my cleaning routine as I said. I was completely alone in the house. I started to get this strange feeling that I wasn't alone. I stopped sweeping the kitchen floor and had a look around. Nope, nobody else there. I went back to sweeping. Now my grandmother on my mom's side had taught me how to clean. She too had OCD, a lot worse than me. But she also said, there is a rule. You are never supposed to sweep the floor at night. It can conjure up things. Or if you sweep over your feet or someone else's, you will have a run of bad things happen to you or them. Don't ask, I don't know. But my nanny knew way too many things. That turned out to be true. Back to sweeping. As I said, it was getting dark when I felt this presence. I also smelled pipe smoke black cherry tobacco. I ignored it for a few minutes, then I felt it behind me. Every hair on my arms and neck were at attention. I kept sweeping and kept my eyes on the floor. I never looked up. By this time, it was dark. The only light on was the kitchen. This presence wasn't going away. Usually, when I get those feelings, especially of loved ones, it's a deep, warm feeling that washes over me. Not this time. I bent over to get the dustpan to sweep the debris in. It's still behind me. I could feel it watching me. So, I said loudly, I know you're here, Sam. I'm doing the best I can. You don't have to keep watching me. At this point, I stood the broom up and ran out of the door. I met my mom in the yard. She was on her way back home. I told her everything that happened. She asked if I saw him. I told her it was definitely him. I smelled his pipe smoke. Then she told me the real reason for not wanting to stay alone in the house. She had smelled it too and had felt his presence. I couldn't believe she hadn't told me before. And I said so. She said she wanted to make sure she wasn't just imagining it. Believe me, she wasn't. I said, get your things. We're going to my house. I'm not getting a good feeling here. She agreed. She wasn't either. So she stayed with me for a few weeks. I'm not saying he would have hurt us or even tried to. I don't believe he knew he was dead. After a few weeks, the feeling and smell left the house. Thanks for reading this. May God be with you always and keep you safe. I was home from college for the summer. My mom and dad had gone out of state for a few weeks, and my siblings were staying at various friends' houses. I agreed to stay home and take care of my parents' pets, a lovable beagle and a gentle calico cat. The upper floor of their house was mostly glass, providing a beautiful view of the pine forest during the day, but at night, no matter how dark it was outside, the windows reflected the inside of the house like a mirror. Since my parents lived in the middle of nowhere, they didn't have cable TV. There were hardly any over-the-air stations either. As a result, the TV was off, and for entertainment, I decided to do some exploring around the house. Hey, it was the 1990s. One evening, I was sitting in the main room on the upper floor, reading Stephen Barnes's The Gorgon Child. Highly recommend the entire Aubrey Knight series. The sun had set outside, and the darkness of the forest was mirrored in the windows. The atmosphere was quite peaceful, with only the occasional small noise from the beagle. But after a while, I heard a faint growling sound coming from the kitchen dining area just behind the couch where I was sitting. The growl didn't seem like it belonged to our beagle. Curiously, I lifted my head from my book and looked towards the window, hoping to catch a reflection of the dog and perhaps see what it was growling at. Instead, I saw the reflection of a large wolf standing behind me. My heart started pounding. I was utterly terrified. Ready to fight or flee, I quickly turned around, only to find absolutely nothing. No wolf, nothing that could be mistaken for a wolf. Not even the beagle. The kitchen and dining area were completely still. Confused and scared, I spent the rest of the evening on edge. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen, but I tried not to dwell on it too much until my parents returned. When my mom and dad got back from their trip, I decided to tell them about my experience. My dad, teasing my mom and her overactive imagination, said she was losing her mind, talking to her long-dead father, seeing glowing green orbs, and seeing reflections of wolves in the windows at night. A chill ran down my spine. I never told my dad what I had seen that night, but I did tell my mom, and I made sure to assure her that, contrary to what my dad thought, I believed her mind was perfectly sound. This incident was both eerie and thought-provoking. Perhaps sometimes what we see and feel carries a meaning beyond scientific explanations. The experience I had at my parents' house that night, whether a reality beyond imagination or just an illusion, remains unknown. But the one thing I do know is that the reflection I saw in the window that night was too real to ever forget.